minutes who will take you through the latest updates on both the SBA EIDL loan application as well as what we refer to as the CARES payroll protection program. There are some new guidance that were issued last night that will be providing some additional information for your SBA lenders. And Marcia will be covering that in a few minutes. Just a few housekeeping items. If you could post your questions in the chat room, we will try as best as we can to address questions that may have common value to others on the call. Often there are very specific questions to a specific business's situation. We can't address each of those, but Marcia will be sharing information with you where you can get those questions answered. So let's get started. We are fortunate to have Kim Stout and Sonia Smith from our SBA Philadelphia office will be on our call and assisting Marcia to address some of the specific questions today. So I want to take a minute and welcome Kim to say a few words on behalf of SBA.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As everybody is aware, information is coming out very quickly. Currently, SBA has 2 loans available for small businesses, and Marcia will be going over the specifics with you. Please note that everybody at SBA and the SBDCs are working very quickly and diligently to help the small businesses, and we're doing everything we possibly can to help you during this time.
Thank you, Kim. And Sonia will be joining us shortly from SBA, and again, you may hear her voice. I want to also introduce Chris Wack. Chris will be assisting Marcia. Chris is our Director of Information Technology at our Pennsylvania SBDC network. He wears many hats, of which one of those is working with our clients on cybersecurity issues, and he will have some words of wisdom and caution for everybody just to be careful of as we are in this new environment. So I want to introduce Marcia McGavis, who brings over 30 years of SBA 7A lending experience to our network, as well as experience with one of our larger 504 SBA lenders in the Commonwealth. So she has been in contact with our SBA partners and working diligently on distilling all of the information that's coming down. So she will be sharing that information with you this morning. Marcia, take it away.
Thanks, Ernie. Sorry, I was just looking at my phone. I have somebody that's trying to get information as it's coming through. This is crazy. By the way, I think Sonia is on, Chris. I think I saw her. She just needs to be unmuted. There she.
What is the username, Sonia? Or
it'll be Sonia.Smith.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. I'll keep an eye out for her.
Okay, I thought I saw her. Looks like Mike Kane just jumped on too. I swear I just saw him. I just want to make sure. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, we're just trying to make sure that if we have, the SBA partners that we have, that we can get them on and get them unmuted so that they can jump in when they want to. They've been absolutely fantastic partners in all of this. So please be patient with them. If you're calling the district office looking for information, they are doing everything in their power to help as quickly. They are getting this information pretty much the same time we're getting it. And then when we see things that still aren't answered, they're going up the food chain and trying to get those answers for us. So like I said, please be patient with them as we get this information and disseminate it as quickly as we possibly can. So there are things we know, things we don't know right now, but let's step through. I think at this point we know more about EIDL than we do about PPP. PPP final guidance just came out last night. So You know, I'm currently trying to get through it. We had some information on it, but this is, things are moving quickly, and everybody at SBA is doing everything as quickly as they possibly can to make sure they're giving the correct information. So let's start with the EIDL program. I want to step you through the parameters for the program, who's eligible, just various information. And we just start off with a few slides. You know, this is our PASBDC website. You can go there to the recovery page and find out, you know, what, you know, everything that we're getting is going out there on that page. So if you're unsure about something as we get it, it is going out on that page. Okay, and then these are just our other services. Most of you could probably care less about this right now, but for future reference, we're here to assist you with lots of different things. There are 2 SBA offices in Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia district office and the Pittsburgh office. The contact information for Philadelphia is here. The folks on the phone from SBA today are from the Eastern Pennsylvania district office. So we've been relying on them very heavily these last several weeks, and they get back to us immediately with answers if they have the answers. And then this is the Pittsburgh office. Very helpful folks at the Pittsburgh office too. So the, you know, basically they cover, they cover the West, East covers the East, pretty self-explanatory. Contact information for them. This is our map of the 16 SBDC offices across the state. As you can see, lots of coverage and lots of helpful people out there who can assist you in navigating the process for either loan program. So, you know, reach out. Everybody's busy, but we're here to help as, you know, as quickly as we can. This is contact information for the various SBDC offices. Next slide. And it's just, I'm going to take those out. We're going to go through who's eligible and, you know, what you need to have on hand for them. This is EIDL, keep in mind, because people have been confusing the 2 programs. So be careful. There are very specific things in each program. So don't mix them up. That's what I'm going to try to go through, and I'm going to remind you periodically, this is EIDL I'm talking about. So we're going to look at potential timelines, although don't know for certain, and how you can estimate your loss and where to go for assistance. So SBA, SBDCs, CDOs, well, the state program is closed now, but economic development offices will still be able to answer questions. Women's Business Centers, SCORE, Chambers of Commerce, veterans organizations. There is lots of help out there for everyone. Next slide, please. All right, so EIDL loan, the economic impact disaster loan. That's what we're talking about. So it's loans up to $2 million for a period of up to 30 years. And the for-profit businesses, the interest rate is fixed at 3.75%, and nonprofit businesses are fixed at 2.75%. And what we're saying is, even if you don't know if you're going to need a loan, apply anyhow. You don't have to take it if you ultimately don't need it, and you have 6 months to make a decision about whether you want to take that money. One of the things that has been we've talked about a lot, credit score is really important in these loans. So if you don't know your credit score, I suggest you go online, look at one of the sites. The one that always comes to mind for me, because it's the one I use, is Credit Karma, and check your score. The other thing that's important is people do put blocks on their credit reports so that nobody can pull a credit report without notifying them, or without them basically taking the block off. If you have a block on your credit reports, take it off. SBA will pull a credit report. for this program. So you won't be asked about a loan amount either. They're going to make a calculation based in many cases on your gross margin. So they're going to look at the gross margin, and what we were saying is divide by 12, multiply it by 6, so about 50% of your gross margin. And it can be, based on, now they're not currently asking for financial information as part of the application. We do believe they will reach out and want at least, one tax return. And it won't need to be your 19 return. It can be based on the 18 return, but we don't know for certain because as part of the initial application, there is no requirement for the additional financial information right now. There was a paper application, and you can still fill out a paper application. I don't recommend it.
Marcia, no, that's incorrect.
Oh, is it? Is that
All
gone now?
applications should go through the application portal that's on sba.gov/coronavirus for the EIDL.
Okay, Sonia, one other question while we're on that. I did have a question yesterday. There was an Amish business that did not want to do it online because they don't do electronic anything. What about a situation like that?
They should call customer service.
Okay, all right, thank you. So there is no paper application. There is also no longer a button that says register. Some of these slides were from the beginning, so we're keeping them and we're telling you what's valid and what's not, because some people were on at the beginning and are coming back on again. So we just want to make sure we're giving you the correct information. So there's no username, no password anymore. It's an email address and a phone number. Next
Marcia.
slide. Yes.
And I also want to add, for any of your listeners that had completed the paper application, they should go in and do this online application because they have the opportunity now to get an advance that will be forgiven.
Right. And yeah, we're talking about that. We're telling everybody to reapply who already applied prior to, I guess, the 30th. Go in and reapply because there is, and we'll talk about that when we get into the actual application. It's a very nice feature. Okay, we'll show you how to get into this. That has changed again overnight a little bit. You used to be able to go on the website, click on a gold button at the top, and boom, you were there. Now you got to go click a few more clicks to get to the actual application. So again, no username, password. The system is no longer running slow. It was awful in the beginning. They made a lot of adjustments very quickly, changed the application process entirely in the space of a week and made it much easier, much more streamlined. I was quite impressed, quite frankly, at how quickly they managed to straighten things out. So there are no documents right now that need to be scanned. So don't even worry about that. If they do later ask for documentation and you don't have it on a computer and you don't have the ability to scan an entire document at one time, I suggest go to a copy center, a Staples, something, take a flash drive and whatever documents they're looking for and scan them onto a flash drive and upload them that way from your computer. So the one thing I'm going to emphasize throughout both programs is that documentation of the use of proceeds is critically important to you getting funds. So keep that in mind. I'm fond of saying if it isn't documented, it never happened. And SBA kind of looks at things that way, the same way. So just keep that in mind. So, and we'll talk about that in more detail as we move through. Now, this next one, we were told you had to, in the beginning, you had to use Explorer or Microsoft Edge, not Google Chrome, although somebody used Google Chrome and it apparently worked. I don't know, Sonia, do you have any update on that?
I'm not aware of any issues using whatever type of a browser you have at this point.
Okay, so, apparently anything goes. They apparently fixed that issue as well. Next slide, please. Oh, I just saw a comment that somebody used Chrome and it worked fine. And I had that comment yesterday. So this is our administrator right now. She's the one at the top of the house trying to make take the directives that have been given to her and put them into usable form, along with an entire team going all the way down to the district offices. So who's eligible? Basically any small business, any small agricultural cooperatives, not farms, small aquaculture, that's a hard one to say, businesses, and most nonprofit, non-governmental nonprofit organizations.
Marcia,
Yes.
I also just want to add owners of rental properties are also eligible, as are faith-based organizations that provide secular social services to the general public. And in regards to like if you're an agricultural entity or not, people wonder, well, am I a farm? Because farms are not eligible. So for example, if you grow something or you raise something, you are a farm. But if you have dairy cows and your revenues are coming because you make cheese, that's a product. So you would be eligible for the program if you were making cheese. But if you are raising something or growing something, you are not eligible.
Right. Thanks. And we kind of get into that in a little more detail, talking about agricultural related businesses, which is pretty much how I refer to them. It pretty much anybody is affected by this across the entire country, every county, every state. So credit history, as I mentioned before, is critically important. Make sure you know what is on your credit bureau report. And if there is derogatory information on there, be ready to explain it. If there are extenuating circumstances sometimes, and the SBA is being very generous, we don't know the bottom score that they will allow, but I know they are being very generous and have lowered the criteria a number of times during the course of these applications. A repayment for this program, for the EIDL program, they have to determine that you have the ability to repay, the SBA loan. Eligibility, you must be physically located in a declared county. Again, pretty much the entire country is a declared disaster, and with every county in every state. Next, please. You can borrow up to $2 million. We talked about this, and the interest rate is 3.75% for the for-profit and 2.75 for nonprofits up to 30 years. SBA will determine the loan amount and the number of years. So just keep that in mind. There won't be any place on the application for you to say that. It's working capital. That's what these loans are for. These loans are designed to keep your business afloat while we're in the midst of this thing, when you've been forced to close a business or lost business through no fault of your own because of directives that you've been given. So working capital, payroll, any fixed debts like accounts payable, anything that you would have paid, as operating expenses, like your utility bills, rent payments, interest on mortgages, things like that are eligible for this program. Next, please. Now, collateral on an EIDL loan. This is just the EIDL loan. So there's no collateral required for anything up to $25,000 under this program. When you go over $25,000, the SBA is going to look at all of your available business assets, machinery and equipment, accounts payable, or accounts receivable, inventory, commercial real estate, anything that is available. They'll take a subordinate lien behind a bank if a bank currently has a lien.
Marcia?
Yeah.
Okay, so this has changed too.
Oh,
so, yes. So any disaster loan over $25,000, SBA will file a blanket UCC1 filing against their business collateral. SBA will not take real estate.
Ah, okay.
Okay, and then in regards to personal guarantees, SBA will not take a personal guarantee for loans under $200,000.
All right, I need to make note of that one. Thank you. That one I didn't know. So under 200,000, no personal guarantees. That's interesting. Okay. Hang on one sec. I gotta grab a tablet for some of this. So anyhow, let's keep going. I can make a note of that while I keep going. So basically, most businesses are eligible. There are some that are not, but we'll get to those in a little bit. But you can, as you can see, owners of rental properties are even included, and that's unusual for SBA. They don't usually, passive real estate is not included, but for this program it is. You gotta
Marcia, and we just want to emphasize that's for rental property. This is not for real estate developers.
Right.
You have to have
Okay.
rental property. You have to have losses of rental income.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, developers would not be eligible under this. So you have to have a physical presence. I think we mentioned that before. A PO box doesn't cut it. So let's just keep going. I want to get to the guts of the application. These loans come directly from the U.S. Treasury, EIDL loans. They are not loans made through the banks, as is typical of an SBA loan for most programs. So SBA basically approves the application and the funds will come from the Treasury. And then there's the website that you go to. There's no cost to apply and there's no obligation to take the loan if you are approved for the loan. Now there is, and we talked about, well, we'll get into that when we get to the screen about the up to $10,000. The maximum unsecured amount is unsecured is 25,000. As Sonia just said, that anything under 200,000 won't require a personal guarantee, and they are not going to look to personal assets. They are not going to look to commercial real estate, which is a big difference from what I just said yesterday. So thank you.
Correct. And anything over 25 will be a UCC filing. So
Right.
although there is no cost to apply, if someone gets a loan over $25,000, there probably will be a $100 UCC filing, and that will
Right.
be included in the loan.
But that's, that's nothing compared to with the normal cost of basically the filings and everything required on the loan and the fees. So applicants with an existing SBA disaster loan do still qualify for an EIDL loan. They just can't be consolidated into one. So you'd have two separate loans. Next, please.
Marcia, and I just want to add, for any listeners that have an SBA disaster loan, say from Hurricane Sandy or from Pennsylvania flooding, on those loans, there is a deferment on payments through December 31st of 2020. And if your listeners have an automatic debit, they should stop that automatic debit and restart it after December 31st if they wish to have a deferment.
The other thing that we might as well put in here, it's actually under PPP, but the SBA is paying 6 months of payments on all existing SBA loans. So that went into effect for 504 loans April 1st. That's the first payment that was paid on behalf of, for the borrower. And the borrowers will have the option of requesting the payment back if it was already made, or applying to not for a 504, but for 7A loans, of applying it to the balance. So that's up to the borrower to determine. These forms have pretty much gone out the window. The SBA may require some of them, but right now we don't know what they're going to be looking for. So this is where we talk about the actual, talking about who is not eligible. And as Sonia said earlier, agricultural enterprises are a straight farm. If you grow something or raise cows or things, you're not. But if you're making a product, or even farm markets and things like that are eligible. If I had a farmer years ago who he was a farmer, but he started producing feed for livestock, and that became an eligible enterprise. I was able to assist him. Religious organizations, as a rule, are not eligible, but if they say a church owns a daycare, that would be eligible. under the program. Gambling concerns where more than 1/3 of their gross annual revenue comes from legal gambling activities are not eligible. Think Pennsylvania lottery, something like that. So, and then the same applies for casinos and racetracks. Next. That's the web page you go to apply for the loans, and there is the customer service information. So as Sonia said, if they want to do a paper application, you're going to have to go to this website, or this contact the either phone number or email there. Sonia, just realize I mentioned to Solomon this morning, it's still possible to get to those paper documents on the website. I accidentally got to them this morning when I was looking for how to get to the new application, and the old process is out there along with the forms. So let's keep going. So again, lots of help out there. SBA certainly. We at the SBDCs are here to help. We're actually trying to take some of the pressure off of the SBA because they are inundated with calls, probably worse than us at this point. SCORE is out there. They're ready, willing, and able to help. Women's business centers, veterans organizations, chambers of commerce. We mentioned them all. Just reach out and look and ask for help. So the one thing, it's really foolproof at this point in terms of submitting your application. I think, there's, that you can't miss information on this application. It won't let you proceed if you do. If more funds are needed than what they approved for you initially, you'll be able to go back, perhaps provide some additional supporting information and ask for an increase. If you need less funds, you don't have to take whatever. If you don't need as much as what they approve you for, you can tell them that too. If the application is denied, they have up to 6 months to provide new information and submit a written request for that. Next, please. That's the end of that. Now let's just dive into the application. I think that's the easiest thing to do. What I did was when this first came out, when they first changed it, I went in and I did a test application, and I got as far as the submit button, and of course I couldn't hit that, but it walks you through the entire application. What happens after that is still a mystery. So this is the first screen you come to now when you go to onto SBA.gov. But and you used to be able to click on that top gold button and get right to the application, but now you're going to need to step through. You just click on the appropriate the appropriate links, and it will take you to, and you're looking for the economic injury disaster loan application. And this is what the first page of that application looks like when you get to it. So it's real simple. And I never thought I'd say that about an SBA application, but it is simple. If you can't do this in a half an hour, something's wrong. Just make sure you're ready to sit down with, with the legal entity name and all the things that you need, because you can't save your work on this. You need to complete it in one fell swoop. So this is the first page of it, and it's the disclosures for, basically this is the first screen that's going to help to determine eligibility. So, and because I could only do this as screenshots, this is the top, this is the next section, and you're going to have to pick one of these as far as what type of entity you are. If you can't click one of those, you're not eligible. And then we're going to jump down to the next screen, and then you have to review all of these. All SBA questions are written backwards since the beginning of time, ever since I've been doing these loans, and that's 30 years. So you have to be able to check the box that you are not any of these things in order to move forward and to be eligible. So this is part of the eligibility. And then at the bottom, you're going to see a continue button. And now this one I did not complete. So the continue button is in gray. It's going to turn blue when you've clicked everything you need to click on this page. Now this form, as I did this one in blank also, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like once everything's finished. We're going to go through this quickly, but what I want you to see on this is the business information. As you can see at the top of the page, you've moved to step 2. So you see all the red bars to the left and the red asterisks. All of that is required information, and you will not be able to move forward until you complete those sections. And that's, that's what it looks like. Now, this is when I started putting in the, the test information. As you can see, every time you fill one of these fillable blocks, it turns green, and it allows you, you can keep going. And then there are questions where there's a red asterisk. Obviously, the red asterisk is not going to turn green, but you must answer those questions. And so basically, it's basic business information. This is pretty easy. So you have a legal name, and then if you have a trading as name, you're going to put that in as well. And then if it's if it's a corporation, obviously it's going to be an EIN. LLCs, and then for sole proprietors, it's going to be Social Security number. So it really depends. And then there's a drop-down box asking you what type of entity it is. And then as you move down, you got to tell it whether you're a franchise, you got to tell it, you just have to answer the questions. It's going to ask about your gross revenue for the 12 months prior to January 31st, and it's going to ask you for the operating expenses for, and it's going to ask you for your, no, we missed something. It's going to ask you for your revenue, your gross, and your operating expenses for the prior 12 months. And then it's going to ask about any rental that lost. As Sonia said, people who own apartment houses other than developers are eligible. So it would ask about any lost revenue. And then this is where they get into this is where somebody like a church who owns a daycare or something like that would add some information about non-secular activities. That's what that means, for any faith-based organizations, because some people have questioned me about that. And then any compensation you receive from other sources as a result of the disaster. So there are other programs out there. Just be careful. You can't double dip on these programs. So if you're getting relief for from another source, you do need to disclose that. And then the primary address of the business. They want to know the physical address, not your PO box. So keep that in mind. As you can see, all of these now turn green because I put information in. And then it talks about, it does ask you, and be sure to include a phone number. Well, it won't let you, a valid phone number and a valid email address. That's how they're going to contact you. So that's important. And then it wants to know what day, the day the business was established, as well as how long have you owned the business. So lots of businesses are bought and sold every day. So that distinguishes between those two. And then you have a drop-down box with limited choices about what you do. And you just click accordingly, and then the number of employees that you had as of January 31st. And then the button at the bottom turns blue, and we can go to the next screen. Now you're in business owner information. This can get a little bit more confusing, especially if you're a nonprofit. And we've had that question over and over, and they're giving us guidance as it becomes available. But we're saying, if in doubt and can't get an answer, apply. They'll work it out on the back end. And because the application takes so little time that it's worth doing that. So,
Marsha,
yes.
This is why it says individual owner / agent. So for a nonprofit, obviously a nonprofit does not have owners per se, and that should be either filled out by the president or the chief financial officer, someone who is familiar and has the authority with the financials of that nonprofit.
Yeah, we've been telling people whoever the fiscal agent is for the entity, for the nonprofit, which would, fall into the category pretty much that you just described. So the other thing, that very top button can be confusing for people because it's asking if your business is owned by another business entity. So SBA does look at affiliation, and we'll get a little further into affiliation, but and I don't know, maybe those rules have changed too, but typically, you know, if you're owned by a parent company, but you're applying under the entity below that parent company's EIN, but you're still going to have to disclose whether that is the case, and then they're going to want to know about that ownership and the size of that business. This is primarily for size eligibility. SBA looks at any affiliated businesses as one entity for the purposes of eligibility. So that's why they're asking that question. You'll have to disclose further information once, you know, depending on which button you check there. So I did this as a very simple application. I said there was one owner, and you're going to fill out that individual information. I guess, you know, for the purposes of an agent, as it says, for a nonprofit, they're going to have to provide a social security number, because this form is not designed to allow you to move forward unless all the things are filled in that are required. So let's keep going down here. Again, a phone number. What's the percentage of ownership? That's an important one, because there are, as we move down, this is very basic information, as I said, and then, you know, the residence, where it's the residential street address. And then you can click on, if there are additional owners, you click on those for the additional owners, and anybody who owns 20% or more of the business will be required to personally guarantee, apparently for loans over $200,000 only. So that you're going to have to provide all the information. Typically, and Sonia, this one I'm not, you know, maybe you know this one. Typically SBA wants to see 100% of ownership disclosed. So I'm assuming that's true here, screen for all, or is this just for over 20?
I believe it was for just over 20.
Okay, and they can come back and ask for the balance of the ownership then. Okay, so as you see, filled everything in. Now we can go to the next screen. Section 4 is additional information. This is more qualifying information. For these questions, you have to be able to say no to all of them in order to be able to move forward. So it's asking about, you know, have you ever been arrested, convicted of anything other than a minor motor vehicle offense? Are you currently suspended, debarred from doing business with the government? Are you on parole? If those are true. Now, some things can be dealt with in terms of getting you cleared, you know, because something like a DUI matters. So that counts. So, but it can be cleared. It's just a slightly longer process. I don't know if they've been able to streamline that at all, but that generally does take weeks, basically, to get that cleared, because you have to supply information, but that'll be addressed by the account officer. And if you got help filling out the form, primarily if you paid anybody to assist you, is really what they're getting at here. Because they want any fees paid to anybody helping you disclosed. So,
Marsha,
yes.
This application is only available in English at this time. So for example, if someone was not able to read or understand English, but had somebody help them translate in another language, this is where they could put that information in.
That's good to know too. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's whether you pay a fee or not. So just to disclose if anyone assisted you with this application.
Okay, so, but then I would assume they'd also want to know it if somebody got paid to do it too, because then.
Correct. It says fee charged or agreed upon. So you would either put a fee in there, $100 or $0.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you. This is the next block you want to check. This actually also appears at the top of the next screen. This is if you want to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000. And what we learned just yesterday is that what they're generally looking at is about $1,000 per employee. So that's why it's up to $10,000. So you have 5 employees, it's probably going to be about $5,000. because this is going to be directly deposited, early on we were saying, yeah, within 3 days, that's not happening. It's taking longer. They have been inundated. Just to put it into perspective for you, in the first week, the very first week you could do these applications, by day number 3, they had over 14,000 applications. So do the math. It's now been available for, this is the 3rd week. So they have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of applications. But so what they're trying to do as they weed through all of this is get some immediate relief out there to you, or as quickly as they can. While it's not going to be 3 days, we understand it happens quickly, that they would take care of this part. So they're asking you to provide your the bank name, the checking account number, and the routing number. Now, for those of you who don't know what a routing number is, it's if you look at one of your checks, all the way to the left-hand side will be a series of numbers, generally starting with a 0, that is the routing number for that particular account. And that's how they're going to get these funds to you. And then down below, there's all sorts of disclaimers and certifications and, talking about the laws, statements required by law and executive order. You can click on that if you want to see those. And
Marcia,
yeah.
I just want to get back in regards to that, the advance, that even if you are denied for the EIDL loan, if you receive an advance, as long as you use that for your payroll and to pay your fixed debts and accounts payable, you are able to keep that, and there is no requirement to repay that.
Right. Thank you. I forgot that. I usually say
That's the most important part. That's why we're telling everybody
to go back and
apply for this, because you can get an advance, and if you use it for fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that you would have been able to pay, and you have the documentation, that's like a grant then.
Yes, it is. We're being careful not to call it a grant, though, because people.
Correct.
Right. But even if we've been told also that even if you apply and are approved and decide instead to not take this and take a PPP loan, you could still keep this $10,000. So
correct. And the main thing is SBA does not allow duplication of services, so you cannot double dip.
Right. Exactly. And that's kind of what we get into. And actually, the way it and we'll get into it in the PPP, but you would have had to apply for and receive your EIDL loan by today in order to basically be able to roll it into a PPP. But because that was an option, and I doubt that anybody managed to get them closed by now. So you will have to make a decision about which way to go. And when we go through this, through the PPP, you'll begin to understand, because I've talked to some individuals, and based on their circumstances, maybe PPP makes more sense, but in many cases, the EIDL loan is going to make more sense, even though it is not forgiven the way a PPP loan will be. So you really have to weigh your circumstances. The PPP is much more limiting in terms of the time that it covers and the repayment of any residual that would be left. This covers a much longer period of time. The EIDL loan is available, and we're going to do a comparison at the end, but we have a side-by-side chart that compares the two programs. But basically, this loan is anything from February 15th through almost the end of the year, up till December 21st. So it's really important for you, when we get through all of this, to consider which one is right for you. So anyhow, this last section is the summary page, and this allows you to check all of the information you put in, double check everything you do. Any incorrect information, could slow things down for you, and that's what we don't want. So each section allows you to edit, and then you'll get all the way down to the bottom, and you're going to have to click "I'm not a robot," and then that button will turn blue, and your application is submitted. Once the application is submitted, you won't be able to go back and edit. So just be aware of that.
And you will
So-
get an application number.
How soon does that, I've been asking, how soon do they get that? Do you know?
Yes, immediately. When it's submitted and an application number comes up.
Excellent. Didn't know that. Thank you. I'm learning a lot here today. That's great. We're
Why
starting
didn't
to get-
Solomon know this?
Well, apparently not, we were saying, you'd probably get an email notification, but didn't know if it was going to be immediate. Yeah, he knows, he's known a lot. But I mean, a lot of this stuff seems to be evolving. So anyhow, all right, this is brand new. So if I stumble going through this, please allow for it, because we just literally got this guidance last night, and someone put together an FAQ basically on it. I'm apparently overnight. I started one this morning, and then Ernie sent this out to everybody so that I don't really need to do it. There is one other part of it that I did look at, but that I probably will add to this, but this is pretty good. So now, prior to this, you may have heard that the interest rate was going to be 0.5%. First, they said up to 4%. Then they came out and said 0.5%, but that really, for any residual loan that is left over, I mean, the banks are going to do these loans. These banks are not nonprofits. They need to make some money, and they're still not going to make any money on these. Trust me, they're not. But they have a board of directors to report to, so they need to at least get close to break even on these. So the interest rate is 1% for anything that cannot be repaid for proof of the appropriate documentation. That is critical, and I'm going to emphasize that over and over and over again. Both of these programs, you must submit information that will show proof that you use these funds appropriately. So, for example, payroll record and then proof of the payments. Some companies use a payroll company to provide their payroll. So they're going to be sending payroll information to the company along with the funds to pay the payroll to the payroll company. That's the kind of thing we're talking about when we say you have to have proof. If you're paying a utility bill, a copy of that bill along with the proof of payment, a copy of the check, or these days an online bank statement is available. Excuse me, a copy of that statement. If you use an online bank statement, though, it's got to have an account number on it to verify that, in fact, that's what was used. So many online statements do not have bank numbers on them. So just keep that in mind. It's going to have to be identification that the bank can rely on. The term of repayment for this is up to 2 years. The original program guidelines allowed for up to 10 years. That's not true. The agency, the SBA, decided that 2 years was sufficient, that we should be long out of this situation before that, and that businesses should be able to repay any residual in that period of time that is not covered. So for example, if you ask for payroll relief for 100,000 and you only use 50,000 of it, but then you use the loan for something else that you shouldn't have. Now you can use up to 25% for other things such as, and we'll get into it in this form, but for other things such as utility bills, rent payments, interest on mortgages, things like that. But if you use it to do something other than what you can show proof of or that is eligible for this, there will be a loan at the end of the period, and that will carry a 1% interest rate for 2 years. Now, these payments are deferred for 6 months. The interest does continue to accrue. However, to the extent you provide proof that you use the funds appropriately, SBA will pay the interest to the bank for the period of deferment on the loans. And then, on anything that is forgiven. If you don't have proof and you end up with a loan, you owe the interest and the deferred interest. So just keep that in mind as well. There's no collateral, no personal guarantees on this. So something that in 30 years I've never seen. So it's a very generous program. Forms needed. There is a Form 2483 that is the application. It is literally, I think it's 2 pages, and it's really basic information. The lender also has a form to fill out, and I can tell you they're going to ask for certification from you on quite a number of things, because on their form it says the applicant has certified, and then there are at least a dozen things on that application that you are going to certify as being true and correct. The last thing you want to do is lie to the federal government. It's not a good move. That's fraud, and they will prosecute. And there is a clear and concise statement in the regulations that says anybody using these loans for fraudulent purposes will be prosecuted. So take that very seriously. They mean it. I've seen, especially over the last several years, it's a wonderful program, but there are people who will try to abuse it. I've seen a lot of indictments over the last several years with SBA programs because of actually providers even doing fraudulent things. So you want to be very careful that what you're telling them is the absolute truth, and don't try to use these loans for anything else, because the banks do have some responsibility, and they're going to make sure that they're going to ask for the kind of information that they need in order to keep themselves out of trouble too. So if they're asking you for information, it's not just because they want to be a pain, it's because they need to protect themselves and you. So just keep that in mind. They have to be filed electronically. Be patient with your lenders. There is just information coming out, and the district offices are working their darndest to get this information about how these applications must be submitted. They do have to be submitted electronically. We're just not sure quite how. We are being told that there, certain SBA, the SBA lenders who already do SBA loans, whether it be preferred or certified, use an electronic system called ETRAN. And what we are initially being told is that it's going to be through ETRAN that they have to submit, but they have not been given that guidance yet. So while they can
let's just make it clear, that's the lender submitting it, not the business. We don't want to confuse our businesses that they're going through an ETRAN system.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So honestly, the businesses don't really need to know anything about ETRAN. That's just confusing them more.
My point is that right now the banks don't have real good guidance on this, and that's not the fault of the district office, so don't yell at them. They're trying to get the answers. So here are the basic guidelines though. In order to be eligible, it has to be a business with fewer than 500 employees, and a business that otherwise meets SBA side standards. So 500 employees is a general rule of thumb. There are some that follow depending on their NEICS code, could have a different size standard that is greater than that, but they are far and few between. I doubt any of you are going to have to worry about that. So so just assume under, fewer than 500 employees. Also, nonprofits, 501c3s are eligible as long as they have fewer than 500 employees. If sole proprietors are eligible, independent contractors are eligible. Now, there is some clarity in this document that if the contractor, well, now this is independent contractor, but it also addresses subcontractors, things like that. But independent contractors are eligible to apply. But if a business uses contractors like 1099s, that's a different situation. The contractor, or I guess it's it's the subs. If a contractor uses subs, those subs would have to apply. The contractor couldn't apply for them. I think that was the clarity I saw. As I said, forgive us, this just came out last night. So
basically, anybody who gets a 1099 and suffers an economic loss is able to apply.
But they have to apply themselves, not through the organization that
Correct.
hires them. Yeah.
Correct. Right. Anybody who receives a 1099, if you receive a 1099 and you have been impacted by the coronavirus, you are eligible to apply. That means you will be applying.
Correct. Thank you. And that we just really got that because that was a question for quite some time. If you're self-employed or regularly carry on any trade or business, you are eligible to apply. Tribal businesses that meet SBA size standard are eligible, and veterans organizations that meet that size standard, the 501c19, they are eligible. If you are in the food service sector, NAICS 72, the 500 employee rule is applied on a per physical location. So that's where affiliation normally comes into play, and they're waiving the affiliation requirement. So each location, each hotel, each restaurant, and the same applies franchises. If they are approved by the SBA on the franchise registry, they can apply on a per location basis as well. And then SBICs, small business investment companies, affiliation does not apply to them as well. Businesses engaged in illegal, these are not eligible. Businesses engaged in illegal activities under federal or state law. There's the cannabis warning. SBA does still prohibit the cannabis and cannabis related businesses, so be careful with that. A household employer like a nanny, staff, something like that is not eligible. If there are any previous defaults on federal loans in the last 7 years, and that actually is a parting from the usual law because that usually is for a lifetime. So this is just over the last 7 years. Next up is good certification, what lenders will need. There is, they have to use the loan proceed. They're going to have to make these certifications basically. The loans request is necessary to support ongoing operations. The borrower will use the loan proceeds to retain workers and maintain payroll or make mortgage, lease, or utility payments. Now, it says here mortgage, lease, or utility payments, and up until yesterday, we were saying mortgage interest. So I don't know if that's changed. This is a summary someone else put together, so I have to check on that. And that you don't have another loan application pending for a duplicative purpose. So this is where you've got to decide which one you want, because you can't double dip. You can't take both loans.
So Marcia, my understanding is that the PPP loan, if you take that to maintain your payroll, okay, because if at least 75% of that amount will be fully forgiven when used for payroll. So if you say 100% of the PPP loan will be used for payroll, then why can't you use the EIDL to make your other payments on rent, utilities?
Well, originally that's what we thought too, but then there was guidance later that said, nope, you have to pick one or the other. So I don't know. Then I guess we still don't have an answer on this. And because that was what I heard in the beginning, and that's what we were telling people, but then it seemed to have changed. So I don't know, Sonia, I don't know.
Right, because it's not for a duplicative purpose, because that is true that SBA will not allow you to double dip. But if you're using some funds for payroll, especially PPP, to get that as a forgivable.
I hear you. And I guess, we go back to that. I want to read, like I said, this is the summary somebody provided, and I want to see exactly how it's written. But if you're telling me that they can apply for separate purposes, we'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll just have to dive into the guidance that came out yesterday at 9 o'clock.
Last night at 9 o'clock. That's why we're a little off here, guys. Sorry, this usually is a little smoother than this, but when you get guidance at 9 o'clock at night that you need for 9 o'clock the following morning, and it's I forget how many pages it is, but and then you have to compare it to what's in the Code of Federal Regulations and everything else. It's a little tough to pull some of this together this quickly. So we will get smoother as we go. So I would suggest maybe check back in periodically with us, or at least review the recordings we do, because they'll probably become clearer as we move on. So anyhow, the time period from this, this one is only supposed to go to June 30th. And this is saying from February 15th through December 31st, 2020. So if that has changed, I haven't read it yet. Sonia?
Let me see here. Yeah, the program is available from February 15th, so employers can rehire their recently laid off employees through June 30th. I don't know where December came from.
I don't know. Like I said, I need to review this. I'm doing this cold, and I didn't put this one together. So we will have to check this, and I'll clean this up. So it is we're going to go with through June 30th. That's why we're saying some programs might make more sense than one program might make more sense than the other, depending on the duration of your economic loss and how long you think you're going to need it, because this one only covers from February 15th through the end of June. And you can only get the proceeds from the time you you close on this loan. So if you don't close on this loan prior to or by April 26th or something like that, you're not going to get the benefit of the full 8 weeks. So, and there is some misinformation about that too. Some places I've read it's 8 weeks. Some places are saying 2 months. That's not exactly the same thing. It's only off by days, but it is a difference. And I've heard some people, in fact, I heard it on the news this morning. It said 2.5 months. That's not true. You're only eligible for a period of up to 8 weeks based on what we had seen previously.
Correct.
So payroll documents, they're going to need to see these records. This is the one thing SBA wants verified. They don't care about a lot of other things that normally are very important to SBA, but you're going to have to show proof to get this loan basically forgiven or portions of it at least. So that supporting documentation is important. As you pay your payroll, I would suggest create a file, either online or a physical file, and you're going to collect the information and that shows proof of these things as you go. That's really important. If you don't have documentation, some of the supporting some bank records sufficient to demonstrate qualifying payroll amounts. So again, you're still showing proof. There are ways, you can go on, you can show where, yes, this payment matches this particular payroll record. So, and that's what the bank will use. It is determining the loan amount. This can get a little confusing. Aggregate payroll cost defined in detail as we go down from the last 12 months for employees whose principal place of residence is in the United States. That's important. You subtract any compensation paid to an employee in excess of the annual salary of $100,000 and or any amounts paid to an independent contractor or sole proprietor in excess of $100,000 a year. So the calculation you make is based, it's not that they're going to get $100,000, but the calculation is based on $100,000. So then you calculate the average monthly payroll cost by dividing the amount in step 2 by 12. Multiply the average monthly payroll cost from step 3 by 2.5. That's 2.5 months, which is more than 8 weeks. So do what they say. Add the outstanding amount.
Because don't forget, you can use that for other things besides payroll. That's why they're giving you that cushion.
Yeah, but they're talking, well, okay, all right. I do understand then, because they would use the 8 weeks of payroll and they can use up to 25% of the loan then for other costs such as utility, rent, things like that. I guess that's why the calculation is working that way.
Right.
Okay. Who is that?
Sonia.
Oh, okay. It didn't sound like you. All right. Any outstanding amount of the economic disaster loan made between January, we actually already said this, between January 31st and April 3rd, could be rolled into the PPP loan, but it will have to be repaid. So I'd think twice about that, because now you're going to go from an up to 30-year payment to 2 years.
Marcia,
So,
I don't think anyone has received an EIDL.
that's what I said earlier.
Right, step 5 doesn't count. If
really
anybody listening has received their EIDL loan, please raise your hand and let us know.
Yeah, seriously, because I can't imagine they could possibly have. It just doesn't work that fast. So we're still on to, sorry if I'm wincing, I have a spasm in my neck, wonder why. The sum of payments of any compensation with respect to an employee, salaries, wages, commissions, similar compensation, payments of cash tips can be considered, or the equivalent of that. Vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowances for dismissal and separation, provisions for group health care benefits, including insurance premiums, payments of retirement benefits, payment of state and or local tax assessed on the compensation of the wages can be included in that as well. Excluded things include compensation of an individual employee in excess of 100,000. We talked about that. Prorated for the period February 15th through June 30th. Now here there seem to be correctly stating it's through June 30th. Payroll taxes, railroad retirement taxes, and income taxes are excluded. Any compensation of an employee whose principal place of residence is outside of the United States, that certainly would be logical. Qualified sick leave wages for which a credit is allowed under section 7001, this I'm not terribly familiar with, for families first coronavirus. There is some help out there for that. You'd have to read that specifically, because I'm not up to speed on that one. Do not count independent contractors. So that's part of it. Use of proceeds, payroll costs related to the continuation of group health. Wait a minute, what is this? Now we did this is this just for the contract? Let's not get into this. This is use of proceeds. So payroll costs, as we've talked about, mortgage interest is not mortgage prepayments or principal payments. Rent and utilities are eligible. Interest payments on any other debt obligations that were incurred before February 15th, 2020. So think loans. Refinance of the EIDL loan, we already talked about that, and there aren't going to be any, so let's just sort of forget it and just go to the 75% rule. So basically 75% must be used for payroll related expenses. And then if there's basically any loan beyond that, it can be used for those other eligible costs that we just talked about. Loan forgiveness is coming up next on the top of page 4. It could be these are designed to be self-liquidating loans. So hopefully by June 30th, you've had all of your eligible expenses and the loan is fully advanced and all of those expenses are eligible, at which point you will not owe any money back to SBA for this. That's what is behind this. That was the purpose of doing this, is to get money into hands as quickly as possible and get employees paid for as long a period as possible. And then, you know, if they do this, even if you've already laid them off, you know, you can get them back and put them on payroll. Doesn't mean they have to go to a physical location to work or to work at all. You just put them back on the payroll. And then when this runs out again, they can go back on unemployment. So, but not more than 25% of this can be used for non-payroll expenses. So keep that in mind. If you do use more of it for that, you are going to have a loan at the end of this period. And that's pretty much what this is saying. I think that may be the last of this. No, it's just who compiled it. So don't worry about it. I'm going to go through this thing and we probably add a little bit to it. But we do have a program comparison that is still pretty accurate at this point, which may help to alleviate some of the confusion. And we have a little bit of time. We can run through it. Do we want to do, I guess, Ernie's gone by now. I don't know if, Sonia, are there any questions? Is there anybody on from SBA who can?
Let's see what the questions are.
Yeah, let me pull them up. There's the program comparison. Oh, I just lost the chat. So let's just see if there are a few questions in here we can answer. Let me go to the top. Wow, lots of questions. We usually try to find some that have some commonality in them. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to waste everybody's time on this. Oh, here's one, Sonia. What about just milk production? Would that's still just that's a farm. So I don't think they'd be eligible. Here's one. I've been receiving emails from customers that they are seeing YouTube videos encouraging all small businesses to apply to receive free $10,000. Yeah, there are things that I think will prevent the fraud. All the certifications, people are still going to abuse it. I think we recognize that, but it's not a good idea because the IG will eventually catch up with you. So
right, and the advance is not $10,000. No. It's up to $10,000, and it's forgivable if SBA comes to you and asks for the documentation on how you used it, and you're able to support that you used it for, you know, the programs that are eligible for you to use that for.
That's true. Looks like, yeah, you know, businesses that were already, you know, you have a lot of businesses in limbo where they received their funding, whether it be SBA or conventional financing, but they never got the doors open. They were in construction. What we've been saying is, yes, you would be eligible to apply for these loans, probably more so under EIDL than under the PPP, because as we've been talking about, PPP is directed more towards payroll assistance than anything else.
Yeah, Marcia, I agree with you on that. For the PPP program, you have to have been in operation on February the 15th and either had employees for who you paid salaries and payroll taxes for.
Right, but the EIDL, if they have that loan and they haven't been able to get the doors open, there would be, you know, some.
Correct.
And if it's an SBA loan, there are deferments, automatic deferments they're doing, and also, or you're eligible for deferments, go to your bank, but there are also automatic payments being made, 6 months of automatic payments by the SBA on your loans. So there is relief for existing SBA loans. Any new loans going on the books, there are automatic deferments on them. So there are situations where people can still close on these loans. And I actually still work part-time for CEDCO in Chester County under CCEDC, and we do 504 loans. There are still 504 loans I'm going to be able to close because the business can make a statement that they'll recover from it, and it really depends on the nature of the business. So, you know, keep those things in mind. All right, let's go to the comparison quickly. I think this is really helpful for people. I can't take credit for this document. Actually, one of our directors at the SBDC, Dorothy Lane up at Wilkes, she put this together and it's really good. We've updated it a little bit. Now, here's the caveat. I didn't have time to update it this morning before this. So if we come to something that has changed, we'll mention it. So EIDL is on the left. That's the first program we talked about. The Paycheck Protection Program is on the right. And we're going to go down through and do the comparison. So under an EIDL loan, who's the lender? It's the SBA. Your funds will come directly from the US Treasury. Under PPP, it's a bank that does 7A loans. Now, here is, so existing SBA lenders who are already in the program, and there are actually lenders who are applying to become SBA lenders. And what that requires is them to basically sign a Form 750, get in touch with SBA and get set up to do them. So, but, you know, I would say, you know, there is a whole list of SBA lenders. If you go to the SBA website that you can find, I forget how many Solomon said there are, but, you know, there's well over 100 banks in the state that can do these loans for you.
And I would just say to start with your local lender first. Contact the lender that you have a business relationship with first and see if they are participating in this program.
Good advice, because they're going to have a lot of information on you already, and it's going to be easier for them to process this than a bank that doesn't know who you are and has not had any dealings with you. And I'd say that's true even if it's just deposit accounts you have at the time. If you don't have any loans with anybody and now find yourself needing one, at least they have some record, you know, have some information on you. Under the EIDL loan, as we talked about, the maximum loan is $2 million. I can't talk this morning, sorry. And you may request an advance up to $10,000, and that's determined by the number of employees, with the calculation being approximately $1,000 per employee. They do say the advance will be distributed within 3 days, but we know that's not true. So don't expect an advance in 3 days. I think it'll be quick, but not 3 days. And Sonia confirmed that this morning for me. You know, there are people who applied at the beginning of the week who have not received their advance yet. But again, they're inundated. Now, one of the things we did learn, I think this was just yesterday, is that SBA is putting on more, they've hired more people to assist with these applications. And the statement was made yesterday, don't know if it's going to be true, we have to go with what we're told, is that they hope to have a great deal of the backlog cleaned up over the weekend, by the end of the weekend. So as you can tell, everybody is working very long hours to get through these because, you know, they know people need relief. So, and this is the calculation on the right. We did this for the PPP loan, and this is how the bank's going to do it. But on the left, the loan, the EIDL loan for $2 million, the SBA is going to make this determination for you as to the amount of the loan. So there's really not much of a calculation. There's no calculation you need to make. And then the interest rates. This is not correct, just so you know. So the annual interest rate for an EIDL loan is 3.75% for for-profit businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits. Chris is just correcting the interest for me. Thank you very much. The interest on the PPP loan is 1% effective last night when this information came out. Actually, I think we heard that earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was it was just yesterday. So The term of the loan for an idle loan on the left, the one you have to repay, is up to 30 years to be determined by SBA. And then the one on the right, the PPP, is 2 years for any portion that is not forgiven. So that's a very short time frame for a business who has been in trouble. Trust me, after 30 years of this, the recoveries take a bit longer than that typically. When is the first payment due? For the idle loan, it's 1 year after the loan origination. So the interest will accrue during the deferment period, but you have a year to start making payments on that. That's another reason this one might be a good idea. You got 30 years, even though you're paying interest, it's a longer period of time that's covered through almost the end of the year, as we talked about, through December 21st, that you can be your disaster period from February 15th, where the one on the right, the PPP, that's only for a period from February 15th through June 30th. So big difference in terms of what you're allowed to look at in terms of getting a loan. So consider that carefully.
Marcia, and I just want to add, on the idle loan program, interest accrues as the disbursements are made.
Right, that's a good point.
So for example, if you are approved for a $2 million loan, it doesn't mean that your first disbursement will be $2 million.
Correct. So, and yeah, that's a really good point that I kind of forgot about and I had been making prior. The loan on the left, and that's the best way. And most SBA loans, that's how it works. You do disbursements as you need the funds, so you're not incurring interest on money that you don't yet need. Now, on the PPP program, I'm afraid that a lot of the banks are going to disperse this in one lump sum. So be very, if that's the case, be very, very careful. And also remember that on anything that can't be forgiven, it's accruing interest that you're going to pay. So I don't know if any of the banks are going to do these as multiple advance notes or not, the PPP loans. That will be up to them to determine that. But it's a question you may want to ask. So and if they're dispersing all at once, then it's up to you to really police how you're using these loans and asking yourself each time you spend some of the money, can I document this as an eligible use of proceeds? So, you know, it's a case where sometimes you might need to pick up the phone and call your lender and ask, you know, can I spend this on this? So just be careful with it, because it is designed to self-liquidate. And I just want to make sure that to the fullest extent possible, people will be able to have these loans forgiven. Collateral requirements. And we already talked about how the loans can be used. So I think we beat that one to death. Collateral requirements, the SBA is going to, we have to change this one too. The SBA will place a UCC lien against any assets of the business. That's all they're going to do. They're not going to take personal, they're not going to take real estate, and personal guarantees are for any owner over 20% of the business for a loan amount over $200,000. So that's a huge difference from what we've been told. PPP
Correct.
loans,
And the UCC lien is only on loans over 25,000.
right, yeah, up to 25,000, they're unsecured. There is no collateral requirement on a PPP loan, no personal guarantees at all. It is for an 8-week period though, and I'm going to emphasize that again, and you can only use up to 25% of the loan for non-payroll related expenses. The idle loan, there is no debt forgiveness except for that $10,000 up to $10,000 on, you know, unless you didn't use it appropriately. So keep that in mind. The forgiveness occurs as you produce documentation and supply it to your lender. They're going to send that information to SBA and say, hey, SBA, the borrower, I certify that the borrower used these funds according to the guidelines, and I would like you to wire funds to me that will pay down the loan by the amount requested here. So they have a period of, I believe it's 60 days after the end of the period, after June 30th, or to get that information to SBA. And you do not need to have filed your 2019 taxes. We're not even really sure. There's really not much that's required on the bank side, but it's going to be up to the bank what they want from the business as proof of being in existence. My guess is they're still going to look for at least a tax return or something, but there's virtually no underwriting that is done on these loans in terms of creditworthiness, character, anything like that. But it's all based on certifications that you make to the bank and the way they have to answer the questions. So they are going to be looking for certain proof from you, because they will still have certain requirements they have to meet as a bank with regards to money laundering and things like that. So just be very, very careful. So everybody's asking, how long is it going to take for the application to be processed? We've been saying 4 weeks and then another 5 days for funding, but honestly, all bets are off. They're doing their best. And hopefully, if what we heard the other day is true, that they're bringing on additional individuals to process these loans, this will move more quickly. Hey, they were really good about cleaning up the website and making that easier, because trust me, if you had looked at it in the beginning, it was a nightmare, and they did a great job of cleaning it up. So if they did that, hopefully they can do this too. The bank will have to follow their internally approved process for the PPP loan. So basically what the banks had to do was go to their board of directors and determine what they would be allowed to do under this program. They had to map all of this out so that they still have certain requirements. So they have to be certain that they're on solid ground with this. These loans are 100% guaranteed to the bank by the SBA as long as they are following proper guidelines. So I think they did a mad scramble to get this in place. Everybody has, because it happened so quickly. So basically, starting today, small businesses and sole proprietors can apply for the PPP loan on the right. Starting next week, independent contractors and self-employed individuals will be able to apply. The EIDL loan is live right now, has been live for a number of weeks. They're going to allow you up to 6 months to determine, whether you need the loan. But, we're saying get your application in. The short window from the beginning has already evaporated. So there is, a big backlog right now. There are affiliation rules. And I think we talked about that under the EIDL program. So, that they will look at to determine the size standard. So you need to disclose all affiliated businesses, and, they'll be looking at that to make sure the business is eligible. On the right, though, the PPP program, some affiliation has been waived on certain industries, but there was no guidance actually on the other businesses at all. There are businesses other than restaurants and bars and hotels that do, have ownership in other businesses that could, block, where the total number of employees for all the businesses could exceed 500. So there was no specific guidance on that in anything that was put out in either last night that I saw yet, although I'm not all the way through it, or even earlier. So we're not certain about that at this point. Say, within doubt, apply. The worst that'll happen is they'll say no, and the applications are so easy that the little bit of time you're going to spend applying is going to be worth your time. I think that was it, isn't it, Chris?
Yes, it is, and we are out of time. I want to thank you, Marcia, Kim, Sonia, for providing us the best information, the best guidance based on what you know. I am Chris Walk, the IT director for the PA SBDC. Just want to make a quick note regarding
Yeah,
cybersecurity.
this is important.
This is the perfect environment for cyber criminals. Chaos, confusion is where they do their best work, unfortunately, and that's clearly where we're at now. So I want to encourage you to remember the acronym BS. In this case, we're talking about be skeptical. Be skeptical of any email communications you get, any phone calls, text messages you get. I would encourage you to bookmark the SBA.gov site and interact with it through that bookmark rather than clicking links that you might get in email. Take very careful note of who the email is purporting to be coming from. It should always be ending in a .gov domain. If you have any doubts about the authenticity of an email, I encourage you to reach out to an SBDC consultant, or you can reach out to me. You can send your queries to info@pasbdc.org, and I'd be happy to take a look at that email and help you determine whether it is authentic. Trust your instincts. Don't send me attachments. Okay, we want to make sure that we continue to preserve your privacy and security, but I'll do my best to help make sure that that we don't have a scam that you may be falling for. I will follow up with this webinar with a link to the recording and our Google Drive location that will have the slides. As you've seen this morning, a lot of this data has aged out, unfortunately, so we'll get these slide decks updated as quickly as we can. And I want to encourage you to continue to follow us. We are live streaming this on YouTube, so you don't necessarily have to register to continue to get these updates. Okay. Again, thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Kim. And I know that there were many very specific, nuanced questions in the chat that we did not get to. If you still need assistance, please do reach out to your local SBDC, SCORE, Women's Business Center, or Veterans organization for assistance. All right. Again, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.